Parents, do you ever worry about whether or not you can trust your child? It's easy when they're young, but as they move into puberty, trusting our kids can get dicey. Even worse, maybe they've lost their trust in you for several reasons. In either scenario, work is required to rebuild what was lost. But how exactly do you do that? Well, today I'm going to be talking to Dr. Henry Cloud. He has a new book called Trust, Knowing When to Give It, When to Withhold It, How to Earn It, and How to Fix It when it gets broken. This is going to be a very important conversation, and it's relevant to any stage of parenting, whether your kids are young or they're teenagers. So let's go ahead and learn more about trusting loved ones with Dr. Henry Cloud. Well, Henry, I'm so excited to talk about your brand new book today, Trust. Thanks so much for joining me.
It's always good to be with you, Meg. I miss you. You know, Meg, I'll tell the audience, Meg and I, end up speaking at different things together. We have what I call the green room relationship, where you sit in the green room backstage, and I always love hanging out with her. I get her to give me a few shots and poke around. Hey, I got this pain over here. What does it mean?
What does it mean? Well, you are very fun. And I think one of the things your audience probably doesn't know is that you are very funny. You're a little peculiar, but you're very funny. And we laugh a lot together. So thank you for the humor and the fun you bring to my life.
Oh, well, it's always been fun. We'll have to do it more.
Yeah, we sure will. You have a very interesting subtitle to your book, named Trust, Knowing When to Give It, When to Withhold It, How to Earn It, and How to Fix It when it's broken. Talk to us about trust. And, well, first of all, I'm interested why you wrote the book.
Well, I think so I'm a clinical psychologist by training, right? And I work both in the clinical world, but also in the business world. And Meg, I don't know of any situation I've ever been called into where whatever the problem is, somewhere in working that out, you've got a dynamic of trust that's either broken down or has to enlarge. I mean, in your practice, take teenagers, for example. How many times, they might be acting out or something, but the trust is broken down. It's gotten dinged in some way, and so they can't work it out. And then sometimes on the other side, when to give it. Sometimes, some parents are afraid to give enough trust so a kid can grow. And so in business and in life, it's always there. Mm-hmm. And the book kind of in part came about because, and way more about this with infants than I do, but God has wired us to trust. And there's a reason for that. Everybody's been sitting here breathing, right? And you hadn't been thinking about it. You've been trusting the air so you can go about your life. Well, there's a very complicated algorithm that goes through your whole body, getting in data through your spinal column and your gut and your head and the skin, the temperature. And it's determined that air is safe.
Right.
See, the human system asks one question before any question 24/7, am I safe? And God has wired us to, when we sense safety, it's like an infant. We have to draw life from outside of ourselves. God's the only one that is self-sustaining. So we get everything good in life from outside of ourselves. That requires trust. And when we feel safe, we're propelled to move towards. The whole system opens up and we make ourselves vulnerable. And we're wired to do this. The problem is, because we're propelled to connect and trust, we also make mistakes. Mm-hmm. Your car is propelled to go forward, but there's some potholes out there. We got to have a brake as well. So, what I tried to do in the book was take that kind of the algorithm of trust. When that button gets hit inside, I'm going to trust this person, that we got a dashboard to make sure we've checked all the boxes. Mm-hmm. Because somebody can feel good in one way, but they're really not safe to trust, and vice versa. So that's what the book's about.
Trust is hard for people. And I think that, at least in my own life and what I see of people around me, people sort of stand back and make a estimate, can I trust you? Can I not trust you? What is it working in us that keeps us from trusting other people if they haven't already wounded us?
Well, generally, it's because somebody has. Trust is pretty natural. We don't walk in the grocery store and all of a sudden, we're hyper vigilant, right? But some people are. If you have PTSD, for example, you're hyper vigilant and the system is alerted all the time. And we have a lot of, false negatives. We think it's not safe when it is. But generally, that comes from some kind of experience in life. In all of your parenting stuff, one of the things we're trying to do in parenting, there's hardwiring that gets put down in relationships and dynamics of patterns of relationships. And early on, or either through trauma, people get wired in a certain way that they are just something feels familiar to them after they've been hurt. And so their system is hitting pause. It's like what I said about breathing. They smell a gas fume. Well, sometimes, that's not anything, but their system is saying, stop, wait, pause, move away, move against. And that's when the trust muscle is broken. And so you see that problem a lot. You see it in business when people try to micromanage somebody, they can't trust them to go do their job. You'll never scale anything if you can't trust, if you can't let go. Then everything's going to depend on you. And you got to, it's really, really, really important to be able to trust, but on the other side, it's pretty devastating when you trust the wrong person.
Right. Well, the first two lines of your subtitle, knowing when to give it and when to withhold it. How do we know when to give it and to withhold? Are some people just intuitively wired to know that? Or is that a judgment you have to make?
Well, I think it's both. We come gifted with various degrees of intuition, but intuition is basically pattern recognition, right? And there's ways in which unconsciously you're putting, things. You drive up to an intersection and you're noticing there aren't any cars and that one's far away and the light's green. You're instantly, you just go through it, right? Because that's intuition. But when we've been either wounded or not trained, one of my favorite verses in the Bible says, solid food is for the mature who've had their senses trained through practice to determine good from evil. And that's really what we're talking about here, is having our senses trained to be able to know, when I see this, I'm going to hold back. And a lot of people, because they are loving and responsible, they kind of assume other people are like that. But what I tried to do in the book was, if we could just have a little dashboard and know I've got 5 things.
What kind of things are those?
Well, trust begins. The most basic foundation of trust is understanding. In other words, we trust somebody when we begin to feel like they really understand me and what I need, what hurts me, what I like, what helps me. Because if we don't feel understood, then, we're holding back. That really has to do with, it starts with, and it's a word everybody throws around, but it is basically neurologically and psychologically wired in us. It's experiencing deep empathy. Now, empathy is when we're getting the feeling from their emotional presence, from their being with this being. Is called attunement. When a mother and an infant are attuned, the baby begins to develop an attachment, and oxytocin and other chemicals start flowing through the brain. But how does that happen? Well, the baby's upset and the mom, through tones, oh, come on, skinny. And they start to feel and they rock them. And the baby goes without even thinking, oh, she gets me. Somebody understands. I'm going to lean into who understands me. But if she's misattuned, they move away. That starts with tone and presence. But then, as we get older, our words are going to tell somebody whether or not we're getting it. How many times you talk to somebody, you walk out and go, he didn't get it,
Right.
And it starts with listening. I was talking about this in a leadership event one day, and a guy walks up to me afterwards and says, I'm the lead hostage negotiator for the FBI. Wow. And everything you just talked about is our entire training program. When a guy's got a bomb strapped to him in a bank with 20 hostages, you don't walk in and start persuading him to put it down. Mm-hmm. Says we walk in and say, hey, I'm Joey. They sent me in here to talk to you. Tell me your name. And he said, we get the name and then we ask a question. So how did we get here today? Tell me what's going on. And they start to draw it out. And then that first kind of opening up begins to happen. You can't persuade somebody if they're not open, and they're not open if they don't feel like you get them. Mm-hmm. You got to feel that. And that's the first one. I mean, how many times have you worked with parents and their kids, and the parents trying to persuade them into behaving or persuade them into doing this? But yes, have you ever sat down and just ask her what it's like to be her in her grade? Mm-hmm. Or here's one we used to do in our family meetings every Sunday night. We go around the table and ask, so what's it like to be on the other side of us this week as your parents?
Wow, that's bold.
Yeah, and we want to hear it. Mm-hmm. And everybody had to do it around the table. And we'd say, well, this felt like you really got it and you really understood. But when you did this, that made me feel this. And so we're learning to try to understand each other. Well, that's the first thing. But that's not enough. There's some other boxes to check. I just had 2 knee replacements, and I went into the first surgeon and looked at my x-rays. I walked in, he goes, oh yeah, you need a total knee replacement. He said, anybody else tells you anything different, that they're wrong. That's what you need. I understand this. This is what I do. Hmm. So let's schedule it and get moving. And he started walking out. And I'm going, whoa, stop. He said, what? And I said, all you did was look at the x-ray and the MRI, and that's how you diagnosed it? We're ready to amputate my legs? Yeah. And he goes, yeah, I totally understand what's going on. And he walked out. And I didn't feel like that's my guy. And so I got referred to another one. He called me up, and on the phone, he said, I looked at your MRI and your x-rays. He goes, how are you walking around?
Wow.
I can't. I've been in a wheelchair since I fell out 2 weeks ago on Santa Monica Pier. Mm-hmm. And he said, well, tell me about the pain. When did it start? How does it progress? He started talking to me. I go, I like this guy better. Yeah, That's the first one. But then that's not enough. The second element is we've got to know somebody's motive. I mean, I'm interviewing surgeons, and one of them, he's Dr. Understanding, but then all of a sudden he calls 3 residents in, and he says, now come look at this knee. See how it moves here. Now that's the muscle I was talking about. We can tell, this is exactly what we're putting in that study we're doing. In fact, this guy would be a great subject, and we ought to put this in when we presented it, and all of a sudden I realize I'm there for him. He's not there for me. It's about his motive, his agenda. We trust somebody when we also feel like they are as concerned about our interests as they are their own. Another verse in the Bible, don't look out merely for your own interests, but also the interests of others. If you feel like somebody's trying to sell you something just because they want to get the sale versus they're trying to meet a need, first they understand what it is you need, and then they're going to see if that matches what you need, or on a team. There's always that person that's pushing their own agenda rather than the team.
But what do you do with somebody who's really selfish or a narcissist, and you're working with them, and that's not that uncommon, where they don't really care about what you think. They don't really care about trusting you or you trusting them. How do you work with somebody like that?
Well, it depends on the context, and it depends on what you're going to have to trust them for. Trust is contextual. Mm-hmm. So, we can sometimes we have to immunize ourselves against what we can't trust the person for and what we can trust them for. Mm-hmm. But if somebody is really narcissistic and you're talking about, a context where I can't trust them until they do see my side, until they do care about it. I mean, we'd have to hear way more, but it's going to sound something like, I'm having something happen here. I'd like to go forward with you in this, but every time I start to talk about what I need from you, you start talking about yourself. And I'm not sure you're really getting it. And until I can feel that, until I can see that, I don't think we can take the next step forward.
Well, I don't know about you, but I am sure getting a lot out of this conversation with Dr. Cloud. I love how he explains that the feeling of being understood and therefore cared about is such a crucial ingredient in building trust with someone. And that's true whether it's the first time you're establishing trust or the 20th. Well, we need to take a quick break, but don't go anywhere, because when we return, Dr. Cloud is going to help us parents know how we can rebuild our children's faith in us. Welcome back to Parenting Great Kids. My guest today is Dr. Henry Cloud. Dr. Cloud is a clinical psychologist, a best-selling author, an acclaimed leadership expert, and a longtime friend of mine. You might know him for his book, Boundaries, which was a tremendous success, and it sold more than 4 million copies. Well, today we're talking about Dr. Cloud's brand new book called Trust: Knowing When to Give It, When to Withhold It, How to Earn It, and How to Fix It when it gets broken. So let's go ahead and get back to my interview with Dr. Cloud on PGK. So what I deal with is parents and kids, and I'm thinking about the kid who can't trust the parent, and so they begin to act out. But the kid can't say to the parent, I don't trust you because you're this and this and this. Maybe they're 10 years old. And maybe you've got a selfish or self-focused parent, the parent who every weekend is gone doing their own thing, but they don't necessarily know that's bad for their kids. So is it up to, say, if you were seeing them in their office, would it be up to you to work with a parent and say, here's the thing, you're just self-focused and you're not even paying any attention to what's going on inside your child? Does that work?
Well, there's amateur narcissists and professional narcissists, right?
Okay, let's unwrap that one just for a second.
Well, we've got a continuum. Mm-hmm. Sometimes people are pretty self-centered because everybody around them is so enabling, they never call them out on it. And so we got to find out first, what kind of parent are we dealing with? Can they even hear this? And sometimes, Meg, you've done this. You try to talk to a parent and they're not getting it. And you have to be very firm and say, listen to me. Mm-hmm. If you do not listen to me and get what I'm saying, your kid is headed for rehab in about 2 years or run away. And you got to set some very firm limits on their narcissism and see if it's possible that they can get it. Now, what I would love to see, if possible, and every context is different, but I would probably try to create a moment with the parent and the kid. And I would try to when the parent says this or that, I would try to ask the kid, I could say, so what do you think about that? And then the parent's I said, no, I'm not talking to you right now. What do you think about that? And as much as we can be the bridge to begin to get something out of them, and then when the parent does the wrong thing, we'll say, hold on. I think he's talking right now. He's telling us something that we need to hear. Then I'm going to put the kid in the waiting room and I'll tell the parent, okay, what just happened right there? That's our problem. Okay, the kid's a 10-year-old version of the spouse that comes home after 20 years of marriage and finds a note. Said, I'm done, I'm gone. And they go, what? Well, they've been trying to tell you for 10 years, and you're not listening.
Right.
It's all about your agenda.
So the listening and the asking, because it's interesting. That's what I do with patients in my office. I'll often have the child and the parent come in, and you can see the relief on the kid's face because I'm going to control the parent and I'm going to make sure that they don't interrupt their kid. And sometimes it's the first time a child really sort of opens up and says something that the parent may be offended by. So is that repairable? You talk about fixing a relationship or fixing things when trust has been broken. How do you do that, either in your marriage or in your relationship with your kids?
It's interesting. We have a tendency as humans to, everybody kind of understands at the 50,000 foot level, if I'm going to trust them again, they got to see what they did and they got to apologize and they got to say they're sorry and then I can forgive them and we'll move forward. Well, that's a really compressed little ball of a process that's got, actually in the book, I put 6 steps in there. The first one is when you've been hurt, it's like a boxer gets hit and stumbling around and you're not ready to do anything yet. I just was dealing with an adult whose father threw her out of the house into the yard as a teenager when he got remarried. Stepmother didn't like her. She's 40 now. She hadn't talked to him since she was like 17 years old. He threw her in the yard and she had to go make her own way. She's 40 and he just called her and wanted to talk. She went into a 3-day, depression and didn't know what to do and all this. And she said, what do I do? Do I answer? Do I text him back? I don't want to open myself. I said, you don't do anything right now. Nothing. You're going to hole up in your corner with your people and you're going to process whatever's going on with you first. Then we'll figure out if you want to acknowledge it, like a certified letter and say, I got your text. I'm thinking about it. I'll respond to you when I'm ready. And just say that. Okay. Because people, when trust has been broken, they either say, I don't want anything to do with you again, and they're angry because of the wound, or they do a rebound. They want to fix it too quick, and it's not safe yet. So sorry will cover the past, and we have to forgive people, but forgiveness and trust are not the same thing. Mm-hmm. I can forgive you for yesterday, but trust has to do with tomorrow. Forgiveness is free. Trust is earned. And so then you've got to get to a place where you got to ponder whether or not it's worth it to go forward. You break up a marriage because of a horrible betrayal. That may be the right answer because you got somebody that is, going to do it again and all of that. But there's a downside to that too. You've broken up a family and sometimes that's not the right answer because you pondered there's enough here to try to work it out. Well, if I go the other direction, then I'm opening myself up again. Well, I don't want to do that. No, you don't want to do that. And that's where you start checking the boxes of, are they beginning to not only get it, but are we beginning to see that they understand the things that have gone wrong, and they are showing me little bitty steps at a time that I'm not trusting that person that hurt me. I'm going to trust a new person as a new person shows up. Meg, everybody, teenagers, everybody's had the experience of their teenager getting a learner's permit for the first time. Remember that day?
Yeah.
That's why they make drugs. I mean, I'm sitting there and going, I wiped her and now she's driving when she was a baby and now she's driving a car. How did this person get to be in that seat? And I'm like freaking out, but I'm trying to contain myself. So I trusted her in golf carts and I trusted her in the parking lot.
And on a bike.
Yeah. Now we're on the street. Mm-hmm. So we're going down and she comes to the first stop sign and she kind of sort of slowed down, but didn't really stop, sort of rolled through it. I said, Olivia, you didn't come to a complete stop. She goes, Dad, I know how to drive. I went, Olivia, pull over. Mm-hmm. She pulls over and I said, let me tell you how you can know when you know how to drive. You know how to drive when I can sit over here and not fear for my life. That's when you know how to drive.
Yeah.
So this is going to take two people. And when the offender is at a point where they're beginning to stop at the stop signs, I'm learning a little bit each time and I'm calming down. I'm not going from that run miss stop sign to where she says, okay, I'm sorry, I won't do it again, and going out on the 405 freeway or Sunset Boulevard. No, we're not doing that. Mm-hmm. We're going to take baby steps here. And so we've got to go back through the model. Do they understand? Are they showing some concern about somebody's interests other than their own? Third one, do they have the ability? Do they have the ability to do what I need for them to deliver on. You got to build that competency. And then do they have the makeup personally? Are they calm under pressure? Can they be compassionate if I'm going to send them into a situation that's required? And their makeup is contextual as well. If we're going to trust somebody, I had a brother-in-law who was a Navy SEAL. These guys are crazy. And I would trust Mark his makeup if the bad guys are coming after me. But if my dog dies in the middle of the night and I need a shoulder to cry on, I'm not calling Mark.
Exactly. Yeah.
But my empathic friend, I'm not going to call him or her to go protect me from the bad guys. So we got to know, what am I trusting them for? You can trust your kids in a lot of ways over here, but maybe not over here because they don't have the ability to handle that yet.
Yeah. I love to hear you say that because a lot of parents, I hear this all the time. I trust my 12-year-old and my 13-year-old with a phone because they're responsible and they get good grades and they've never given me trouble. And we only have a couple minutes left, but when should a parent know, maybe answered already, when to really trust their child and when not to? One of the things I tell parents is you can only trust a 12-year-old to do 12-year-old things. But one of the mistakes parents make, I think, is that they feel because they have a good kid that the 12-year-old can think like a 17 or 18-year-old. And it makes a parent feel good because they have the 12-year-old they can trust and their friends have a child they can't trust. So just briefly touch down on that if you could, when parents can say, I really trust you, rather than just sort of saying, you're a good kid.
Well, trust is not a toggle switch. A toggle switch has either off or on, right? And trust is a little bit like you're dialing up the light. And when you dial it, it gets brighter. When my kids got to be teenagers, I got the whiteboard out. They used to hate that. Okay, time for a life lesson, right? Guys, look, you're about to be teenagers. You're going to want a lot more freedom. And let me promise you something. I want to give it to you. The last thing I want to do is be looking over your shoulder and wondering what you're doing. I want you to have 100% freedom. 100% freedom. They like that, right? And then I said, but let me tell you, there's a formula. Freedom equals responsibility equals love. I will always make sure those are equal. You'll have as much freedom as you're showing responsibility to handle that particular freedom. And the way we're going to judge responsibility is love. Are you doing anything harmful to yourself or anyone else? Mm-hmm. And so let's go back to the phone. They're not ready for 100% freedom, but we're going to start and we gave our kids phones a tiny bit earlier because they were way over the Palisades at school. And sometimes, rides and carpool, they did need to get a hold of us. We're going to start there. And we're just going to see how this little step goes, first. I know you're responsible in all these other areas. This is a different context. Mm-hmm. And we're going to watch this and we're going to see how it goes. And when you got your first social media account, we're going to see how that goes. And you grow into this. It's just like I was working with a couple had to repair a marriage and he had to yield to inviting her all of his accounts. She could monitor him. She had location trackers, all that kind of stuff. And then gradually, and I chronicled their story and the path of it in the book. It's really helpful for people in marriage to know the steps. Gradually, I remember one time he said to her, oh, I got to fly to whatever for some meeting. Here's my itinerary. And he starts telling her and she goes, I don't need that. I don't need it anymore. But that had come through a track record, but also she was watching him pursue his own recovery. And, there's no way he would miss a therapy appointment. There's no way he would miss talking to his accountability partner. And he's watching this. And then you go, I don't have to watch them. They're fine. But parents, it's contextual. They don't know how to handle everything that comes up on the phone if you just give them one.
Right.
That takes training.
Right. And it takes maturity too. But that's a real big deal. And I hear that all the time. I trust. And I say, what do you trust in? Because there's so much out there that, can be harmful for kids or addictive, or, how it all goes.
Plus, they don't know. They don't know what they don't know.
Exactly.
And that's where it takes these conversations and trainings. We talked about understanding. We trust somebody when they understand us. Well, a predator can reach out to them and make them feel really understood.
Yep.
And they don't know that there's more than one box to check. Go back to the fifth element, track record. Okay. You're going to meet a new friend and they look great. But what does a parent do that a kid doesn't think of? Parent starts to call friends of the friend and their parents and say, has your kid been over there? What's the family like? What did they? The parent is actually looking at a track record and establishing how we know this is a good kid or good house for a kid to hang out with. It's not just because you call the parent,
right?
And they seem okay. They could be a nutcase, and
right.
We don't know it.
Nutcases. So Henry, how can people get hold of you, and how can they get a copy of your book?
Well, you can get the book wherever books are sold, as I used to say. I would rather, the best way is to go to Meg's house because she's got a bunch of them and she'll have you over for dinner and be glad to hand you one. But wherever books are sold, if you go to Dr. Cloud /trust, right now, I think depending on when this airs, and you get it there, you get access to a bunch of bonus free materials.
Awesome. Well, I will have people over for dinner if you come and sign the books.
That might be a deal.
That would be fun. Yeah.
Get my people to talk to your people.
Yeah. Okay. Henry, we're out of time. This has been fabulous. Honestly, I could talk to you for 2 more hours. But I'm so grateful you're here. My guest is Dr. Henry Cloud. The book is Trust: Knowing When to Give It, When to Withhold It, How to Earn It, and How to Fix It when it gets broken. This has been delightful. Thanks, Henry.
Good to be with you, Meg.
To all my listeners out there, thank you so much for tuning in. I know I've said it before, but I'll say it again. The topic of trust is foundational to the success of any relationship, and especially the one between a parent and a child. Even if that child is grown and has kids of their own. I hope this conversation with Dr. Cloud got your wheels turning and you're assessing your own life, seeing how you can apply the wisdom he shared with us today. Let's go on to my points to ponder. 1, teach your kids how to trust you. Let's face it, how many times have we told our kids we're going to do something and then we don't? Or how about telling our kids that we're going to be working on being more patient and losing our temper less, and then we fail? Well, kids watch us too. And if we cheat on our spouse, we lie to our friends, talk behind someone's back, our kids learn that we can't be trusted. Well, this week, pay attention to the times when you might be breaking your child's trust in you. 2, talk with your kids about trust. One of the best places to start is telling the truth. Tell your kids that in your family, everyone needs to tell the truth. Also reassure them that if they make a mistake, that family is the place where they can admit it. If you find they've told a lie, rather than just tell them they should never do it again, talk to them about your relationship with them, their relationship with others, and how being honest with one another is really important. Ask them how they would feel if you told them lies. Only do this if your child's older than 8, because younger than that, they really won't be able to relate to what you're saying. 3, trust your kids with activities that are age appropriate. We often try to trust our kids with things they really can't do. We trust our kids to go to a party when they're 15 and not drink beer with the other kids. Or we trust our 16-year-old to stay home alone for the weekend because he's a, quote, good kid. Well, sure, he may take good care of your house, but once his friends learn that he's home alone, they come over in droves. He has a hard time keeping the kids away. When we trust our kids to do things that are above their age grade, I call it, We set them up for failure. Again, trust your 13-year-old with 13-year-old behaviors, not 16-year-old ones. I want to give a very special thank you to my guest from today, Dr. Henry Cloud. If you want to learn more about Dr. Cloud, you can visit his website, drcloud.com. That's Dr. DR for Doctor, cloud.com. From there, you can pre-order his book, Trust, and also access the many other resources Dr. Cloud has available. Now let's recap my 3 points to ponder. 1, teach your kids to trust you. 2, talk with your kids about trust. And 3, trust your kids with activities that are age appropriate. Friends, if you need help, encouragement, or answers to any questions about your kids or your relationships with them, go to meekerparenting.com. I have courses, tips, blogs, and a lot more to help you with. And if you know a dad who needs encouragement while you're there, check out my brand new Strong Fathers, Strong Daughters Masterclass. And always remember, great kids are raised, not born.